Hi there. Today I'm going to give a quick presentation on the messenger RNA vaccines, and that includes both the Pfizer and Moderna, but not the Johnson& Johnson or AstraZeneca. So off we go. So how do the mRNA vaccines work? So the technology has actually been around for over a decade. So it's not a new technology, um, but the way it was rapidly developed is the new part here. And it's also being used in gene therapy and cancer treatments in addition to vaccines. What happens is you use the RNA and you code for a small segment, in this case, of the SARS or COVID, and then the host cells then translate that RNA into viral protein, and the immune system, including the T cells, react to this by making antibodies which can respond if a SARS virus is present. And so there are only 29 main proteins, which is not that many, in a COVID virus. And the primary protein on the outside of the membrane is the spike protein, which is what the messenger RNA is coding for. And that is how healthy cells are infected. And the spike protein, and only the spike protein, is what's coded for. So the downside of mRNA, as opposed to the adenovirus, which is used as DNA, is it is very fragile. The Johnson & Johnson uses DNA and in conjunction with an adenovirus, so it is less fragile. But because it is so fragile, the mRNA has been encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle. And then after it's injected, it fuses with the human cells. And then the ribosomes translate the mRNA and build the spike protein. And the mRNA is destroyed by the cell. It doesn't stick around or become part of the genome, if there's any concerns about that. And the spike proteins are then passed along through the cytoplasm to the surface of the cell, and then the macrophages of the immune system recognize those and send the information to the B cells and the T cells to make the long-term immunity available, and then the host cells is destroyed along with the transfected mRNA. So how well do they work? So in the Pfizer trial, there were 38,000 patients in the data set, and they all received 2 doses of either the vaccine, which is whenever, anytime you see the BNT, we're talking about Pfizer, and the dose was 30 micrograms, or placebo, and there was 3 weeks between each dose for Pfizer. And VE, or vaccine effectiveness, was the primary endpoint. And so that proved to be 95 cents after the second dose, with a confidence or credible interval of 90 to 97%. So anytime you get a confidence interval north of 90%, anyone who's familiar with biostatistics know we're talking very good data. And those were all at least 7 days after the second dose. And so there was no evidence of COVID infection before, during, and after the vaccination. And these were consistent across the subgroups, including sex, age, race, ethnicity, and other comorbidities, including obesity. That was part of the data set. And only 1 case of severe COVID was documented in the treatment group, while there were 9 cases in the placebo. So the vaccine seems to be very effective in preventing severe COVID infection. And in the case of the Moderna, anytime you see Moderna, I always look for 1273 for Moderna. The dose was 100 micrograms, and it was giving 4 weeks. The second dose was given 4 weeks after the first dose, and the um, interval, the vaccine effectiveness, was up at 95% at 14 days after the second dose. So that's similar to the BNT or Pfizer. Okay. So what are the side effects? So common side effects with Pfizer are similar to vaccines in general, but it happens a bit more frequently. So you have local adverse effects in nearly 85% of the patients. And I will say, in my case, my first dose, I didn't feel anything. A second dose, I actually got it almost exactly a week ago, 8 days ago, and I still have a quarter-sized bruise on my arm from it, which I don't get that with my influenza vaccine, but better than getting COVID, I'll tell you. So fatigue, 63%, headache, 55%, muscle pain, chills, joint pain, all the other things that you can expect from any other vaccine. And I will say in my case, first dose didn't feel much of anything. Second dose, I had like an afternoon where I felt pretty punky. Older patients occur less often, probably because they don't have as big an immune response. And the good news, it's serious adverse effects were extremely rare. That is the take-home message. So, more patients in the Pfizer group developed Bell's palsy, but of the 33,000, we had 4 cases. And there was some also lymphoadenopathy, 64 cases that showed up in the group that got the vaccine, and quote unquote allergic reactions, which you'll get in any study you do. They were excluded from the vaccine if they had a history of severe allergic reactions to vaccines. So the people who did have a severe reaction were individuals that carried epinephrine for other anaphylactic shocks as well. So it's probably not the messenger RNA component or the lipoproteins and that they're encapsulated in, but in all likelihood, it's the polyethylene glycol or PEG component of the vaccine that it is suspended in. And so patients with a history, here's the take-home message, patients with a history of anaphylaxis should be monitored for 30 minutes post-vaccination, and everyone else 15 minutes is adequate to make sure that there's no anaphylaxis occurring. So what happens if you don't get your second dose, and how effective is a single dose? And can a different vaccine be used if you get Pfizer? Can you get Moderna for the second dose and vice versa? So the Pfizer has a VE of 52% in 12 days after a single dose. So there's your answer. About 52% if you just get that one shot. So this information is a little outdated. It's from a couple of months ago. They were thinking it would be better to at least, if there turned to be a shortage of vaccine, to at least get a one shot and at least get this 52% level done in more people. But it turns out that there is enough vaccine hitting the healthcare system that doesn't seem to be an issue going forward. And after the second dose, of course, we go up to that 95% as we just talked about. So there will be no need, hopefully, to look at single dose efficacy in the larger population. at least in this country. Who knows? And so both Pfizer and Moderna are, of course, messenger RNA vaccines, and they are slightly different, but they so if you can't for some reason get a second dose of the one you started with, you can get the second dose. But any SARS vaccine should be given 2 weeks from any other vaccine. And if you do get two of the vaccines, even if you have to mix them up, then no additional vaccine. If you get a Moderna and a Pfizer, there's no point in going back and getting another Moderna, getting a third dose. Just stick with those 2 doses that you got. So what studies, populations didn't make it in the studies that we'll need to learn more about? And these were the pediatrics, adolescents, pregnant, and the immunocompromised, which are very important patients, but because of the speed this came to market, we'll still be gathering information going into the future. So once again, for the Pfizer, it was at least 16 years of age, but at a very low level. So they're going to stick with 18 years of age as the studied, that were studied for safety and efficacy. And so Moderna did not have anyone under 18 years of age either. So pregnancy was also excluded. Some people did become pregnant during the study and are currently being monitored to see if there are any adverse effects. Nothing that, at least that I've heard of so far. And of course, immunocompromised patients were excluded as well. So these are the ones, are the folks that's going to be very important for us to find out and verify that it's safe for them, because they are the ones who detect the patients who need them almost more than anybody. So they can be vaccinated, but not based on studies, but based on a discussion between a patient and their healthcare provider. So generally, being vaccinated is deemed a more favorable than getting full-blown COVID. So the risk exceeds, or the risk does not exceed the side effect potential. And it's likely for pregnant women. So if the pregnant woman goes in, it's probably, according to everything we've seen so far, safe for a pregnant woman to get vaccinated, and in all likelihood, probably advisable. The risk of getting COVID would exceed the risk of getting the vaccine. So this slide, again, the information is still a couple of months old. It does look like a lot of vaccine is coming on board, so we should be fine. So at the time, it was going to be stepwise in first phase, looking at healthcare providers, other essential workers, high-risk adults, and then adults at 65 age or older, and of course long-term care facilities, and the ultra-cold storage is more available in a lot of these settings than they are in the general population. So it was good and continues to be good for those folks to get vaccinated. First, there is some pressure from other industries like the airlines, healthcare work, or not healthcare workers, but food service workers, and people working grocery stores, those type of things. We'll hopefully will be next on the list. So, and we're looking at in January through March getting that first phase vaccinated, which is where we're at now. We actually look to be ahead of schedule, actually, with at least 2 states, I believe, as of this morning, that are just saying, everyone who wants a shot, come and get it. So we're well ahead of schedule. And President Biden said that he was hoping to almost open up the country more or less by 4th of July. So this information actually was undershooting a little bit. So we have 100 million doses that have been ordered of Pfizer, and we're going to look at an additional 100 million this year. Then Operation Warp Speed. That sounds like it should be part of Space Force, but it is actually how we got these mRNA vaccines to market so quickly. So we've already got 100 million from Moderna as well, and we're getting another 100 million, so that's 400 million doses of those. So 200 million people can be vaccinated. So we're getting very close to what we need for herd immunity with that amount of vaccine, which is great. And so there are the non-mRNA vaccines, and Johnson & Johnson is not on here, but Johnson & Johnson is out. AstraZeneca is more of an old type that seems to potentially have some side effects, particularly in Europe. So AstraZeneca, I'd be real surprised if that becomes part of our armamentarium. But definitely Johnson & Johnson is going to be added to the mix here. The one-shot dose, which gives, if I remember correctly, about 76% protection after the single dose, using the adenovirus delivery system. And we should have things well in hand by July. So major obstacles, I think we're starting to overcome those to get to herd immunity. So cold chain logistics is the main thing, because mRNA vaccines are so fragile. They have to be kept very cold. So the Pfizer, we're looking at 15 days if in a thermal shipper, and then it'll keep up to 6 months in ultra low, which is a -70 is the standard for ultra low refrigeration. And then at typical refrigeration, you got 5 days to get that in a patient's arm. And then for a Moderna, a little bit easier. You have 6 months in a standard freezer and 30 days once it's refrigerated. And you have to be sure that we get that second doses in for after 3 weeks for Pfizer and 4 weeks for Moderna. And but you still have a window to get that in. I had Pfizer myself, and they didn't have vaccine right at my 3 weeks, so I went in and got my Pfizer after 4 weeks, and that's perfectly okay. You have an additional 4 weeks beyond that to go ahead and get that second dose in to get your full 95-96% immunity. And vaccines themselves don't save lives. We have to get the vaccinations into people. So when this study was done, there was 63% that would be willing to get it, which is up from a dismal 50%. So we as healthcare providers need to do our part to encourage people who are on the fence to go ahead and get one of the vaccines, so we can get to herd immunity and the country can open up again. So physical distance and wearing a mask after the vaccine, this again is a changing, the finish line keeps changing, but currently they're very good at preventing severe COVID. But it's not 100%. You always got that 4 to 5% to worry about. It does seem to offer some protection from transmission, which is great, but we don't know to what extent yet. So please keep wearing the mask until we're told differently. And we're still looking for that herd immunity. There's that phrase again. And that is, we are looking at, there we go, 70% is the magic number for herd immunity. And so once we get to that 70%, then we're going to get what we're all looking for is to loosen those restrictions. And those are the references if you need them. And thank you very much. And have a great day, everyone.